Sometimes, a single moment can change everything, just like that letter changed his life. What if your turning point is right around the corner? Dizzy subscribe to Future Path and be part of stories that move, inspire, and awaken purpose. Don't just watch, walk your path. I found a letter on my doorstep 3 weeks ago. No envelope. No stamp. No return address. Just a folded piece of paper tucked neatly under a small gray rock, the kind that looks ordinary until you realize it's not supposed to be there. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe a neighbor's mail that got misplaced, or some kid's prank. But there was something about it, the way it sat there, perfectly still, like it had been waiting for me, that made me stop. The morning was quiet. The air was cool, and the city hadn't woken up yet. There's a kind of peace at that hour, the kind that tricks you into thinking everything in your life is steady and predictable. But life has a way of shifting under your feet when you least expect it. I bent down and picked it up. The paper was creased but dry, like someone had made sure it wouldn't get ruined overnight. The handwriting on the front was simple, but precise. My name, no title, no flourish. Just me. And that's when something strange happened. My stomach tightened. Because whoever wrote it, they knew me well enough to know where I lived, but not well enough to call or text or email. I stood there for a full minute, holding that letter, trying to decide whether to open it or toss it in the trash. Rationally, I should have walked away. But curiosity doesn't listen to logic. It whispers instead, quietly, insistently, open it. So I did. The first line hit me harder than I expected. You probably don't remember me. 5 words. That's all it took. 5 words that cracked something open inside me. Because whoever wrote this letter knew something about me, something I wasn't proud of. They knew that in the whirlwind of building, pushing, striving, I'd left people behind. People I once knew. People who once mattered. The letter went on. I worked for you once. It wasn't for long, a few months, maybe less. You were busy. Always in motion. I never expected you to notice me. But one day you did. I could feel my heartbeat in my chest as I read. The words were calm, almost gentle, but they carried a weight I couldn't explain. You asked me for my opinion once, in a meeting. You probably don't even remember. But you listened. You made me feel like I mattered, even if just for a moment. That one question changed the way I saw myself. I stopped reading. My hands were trembling slightly. I tried to remember who this person could be. The name wasn't signed yet. And honestly, it didn't matter. Because I already knew what this letter was really about. It wasn't about them. It was about me. About the version of me that had become too busy chasing the next idea, the next deal, the next success, to notice the lives brushing past mine. I sat down on the steps and kept reading. You once said something, I don't even know if you meant it. You said, we build things not to escape who we are, but to understand it. That line stayed with me. It carried me through failure, through doubt, through the nights I thought I wasn't enough. You probably forgot those words the second you said them. But they changed everything for me. I had no memory of saying that. But it sounded like something I would have said, back when words still carried meaning, before they became sound bites in endless interviews. The letter continued, I wanted to thank you. Not for the work or the company, but for the spark. For showing me that what we create outlives what we remember. By the time I reached the last line, my throat felt dry. The letter ended simply, you won't remember me, and that's okay. Just don't forget why you started. No signature. No clue. Just silence. I sat there for a long time, staring at those words. The world around me began to move again. Cars starting, neighbors walking dogs, the sound of normal life returning. But for me, time had stopped. That single page had reached back through years of noise and reminded me of something I didn't even know I'd lost, humility. I'd built so much, achieved so much, but somewhere along the line I'd forgotten the people who helped make it possible. The interns, the assistants, the quiet ones who never demanded attention but gave everything they had. And maybe that's why this letter found me now, when I needed it most. I folded it carefully, the same way I found it, and brought it inside. I placed it on my desk, next to a stack of reports and contracts, a silent rebellion against all the noise that had consumed my days. For the rest of that morning, I didn't check my phone. I didn't open my laptop. I just sat there, thinking. Thinking about the invisible ripples we leave behind. About how easy it is to forget that every action, every word, might become part of someone else's story. Maybe the letter wasn't from a real person. Maybe it was a reminder from the universe. Or maybe, in a strange, almost poetic way, it was from an earlier version of myself. The one who still believed that small moments mattered. Either way, I'll never see the world the same again. Because once you realize how much you've forgotten, how many people you've unknowingly shaped, you start to move differently. You start to see differently. And if I ever find out who wrote that letter, I'll tell them the truth. They didn't remind me who they were. They reminded me who I am. Before I tell you what happened next, I need to ask you something. Have you ever been so focused on where you were going that you forgot where you started? So determined to win that you stopped noticing what you were losing along the way? Because that's where I found myself, sitting at my desk, that letter beside me, the ink still fresh in my mind. I must have read it 20 times that morning. Every time I did, something new hit me, a memory, a feeling, a face I'd buried under years of ambition and deadlines. And the question kept circling in my head like a ghost that refused to fade: who had I become? I used to think that success was about forward motion, about never stopping, never slowing down. I believed that if I just pushed hard enough, long enough, everything else would fall into place. But I was wrong. Because what good is moving fast if you're heading the wrong way? That letter, that small folded reminder of my humanity, forced me to stop, to look back, to ask the one question I'd spent my whole life avoiding: what am I actually doing all this for? When I was younger, I had a fire in me that couldn't be contained. I didn't want fame, or money, or recognition. I wanted impact. I wanted to build things that mattered, things that could outlive me. But over the years, that vision got clouded by noise, investors, deadlines, interviews, expectations. And somewhere in that noise, I lost the silence where purpose lives. That letter was like a mirror. It didn't tell me who I was, it showed me who I'd forgotten to be. I remember sitting there, my hands gripping the paper, my mind flickering between pride and guilt. Pride because I'd inspired someone. Guilt because I hadn't meant to. I thought about the people I'd worked with, hundreds, maybe thousands over the years. Names that had faded, faces that had blurred into conference rooms and late-night deadlines. How many of them had stories I'd never hear? How many had moments like that, moments I'd given without realizing it? And that's when it hit me. The letter wasn't just about one forgotten person. It was about every person I'd failed to remember. I stood up, walked over to the window, and looked out at the city. The skyline glowed faintly under the morning sun, glass and steel stretching toward the sky like ambition itself. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel inspiring, it felt empty. Because I realized something painful. Somewhere along the line, I'd started treating people the way I treated goals, as steps on a staircase that only went up. But you can't build a future on forgotten people. You can't lead without seeing those who follow. The question burned deeper: when did I stop caring? I remembered my first company, the long nights, the endless coffee, the laughter of people who believed in something that didn't exist yet. We didn't have money or fame, but we had purpose. We looked out for each other back then. Every small win mattered. Every voice was heard. Somewhere along the way, I traded that for efficiency, for results, numbers, metrics. And in doing so, I'd stopped asking questions like "how are you?" and replaced them with "is it done yet?" I sat down again, staring at the letter like it was alive. Because maybe it was. Maybe it was breathing the truth I'd been too busy to hear. "You probably don't remember me," that line echoed over and over. Not just as a message from someone else, but as a message from myself. Because the truth was, I didn't remember me anymore. The version of me that believed in kindness before efficiency. The version that saw people, not roles. The version that listened more than he talked. When you move fast enough for long enough, you start mistaking momentum for meaning. And that's where I'd been living, trapped in motion, convinced that speed was progress. But it's not. Not if you've forgotten why you started moving in the first place. I thought about reaching out to whoever wrote it, but I hesitated. I didn't know what to say. Thank you. For what? Reminding me I'm human. No, this wasn't something a reply could fix. This was something I had to live differently to understand. So I made a choice. I turned off my phone. cleared my schedule for the rest of the day. And I sat there, asking myself the questions I'd spent years running from. What do I actually value? Who have I neglected? When was the last time I listened without waiting to speak? The answers didn't come right away. But that's the thing about real questions. They don't give you peace, they give you clarity. And clarity hurts before it heals. By sunset, I finally understood why that letter had arrived now. It wasn't random. It wasn't coincidence. It was a reckoning, a reminder that no matter how high you climb, life will always find a way to pull you back to the ground where your roots belong. That night, I placed the letter on my bedside table. Not as a mystery to solve, but as a promise to keep. A promise to remember. To slow down. To see again. And maybe, just maybe, that's what the writer wanted all along. Not to be remembered, but to remind me to remember myself. So now I ask you, the same question that changed everything for me. When was the last time you looked at your life, your work, your relationships, your dreams, and asked, why am I really doing this? Because sometimes, the hardest question isn't the one someone asks you. It's the one you finally ask yourself. The morning it happened was nothing special. No lightning bolt. No music swelling in the background. Just the quiet hum of another day starting, the kind that looks ordinary until you realize later that it wasn't. I woke up before dawn. My phone was already buzzing with notifications, messages, meeting reminders, headlines, numbers. All noise. I scrolled without thinking, letting the world pour in before I'd even taken a breath. Then I stopped. Something inside me, maybe exhaustion, maybe intuition, told me to put the phone down. So I did. For once, I let the morning be silent. The light from the window was pale and soft, brushing across the floorboards like it had nowhere else to go. I made coffee the old-fashioned way, no rush, no multitasking. Just water, heat, patience. And for the first time in months, I realized how foreign that felt. The silence was heavy but comforting. There was something peaceful about hearing nothing but the soft drip of coffee and the faint hum of the city outside. Then I stepped outside, and that's when I saw it. A small folded piece of paper, held down by a stone on the doorstep. At first, it didn't register. I thought it was trash, maybe something blown in by the wind. But then I saw my name. Not printed. Not typed. Handwritten. Sharp ink. Steady strokes. The kind of handwriting that belongs to someone who takes their time. I froze. It's strange, how something so small can pull the world out from under you. Just a letter. Just paper and ink. But it felt like a pulse. I looked up and down the street. Nothing. No cars, no people, no sound. Whoever left it had done so quietly. Deliberately. The morning air was cold enough to bite, and the city was still wrapped in that soft blue half-light between night and sunrise. It felt like the world was holding its breath. And maybe so was I. I picked up the letter. It wasn't sealed, just folded once carefully. The paper was crisp but dry. Someone had made sure it would survive the night. My first instinct was caution. You don't just open strange things on your doorstep. But then again, something about it didn't feel random. It felt intentional. I stepped back inside, sat at my kitchen table, and just stared at it. That's when I noticed something odd. The rock that had been holding it down wasn't just any rock. It was smooth, oval, and faintly blue, the kind you'd find near a river, not in a city. A detail too specific to be coincidence. The letter looked harmless. But in that moment, it might as well have been a bomb. Because part of me already knew, whatever was inside it, I wouldn't be able to forget it. I hesitated before opening it. Because deep down, I sensed that once I did, there would be no going back. And I was right. The handwriting inside was clean and calm, almost familiar. Each line spaced just so, the way you write when you're not in a hurry, when every word matters. It started with a sentence that pulled me into the past. You probably don't remember me. My stomach dropped. That one sentence carried more weight than 1,000 pages. It meant history. It meant connection. It meant something or someone I'd lost along the way. I read the next few lines, and suddenly, the world outside seemed to fade. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, even the warmth of my coffee, gone. Because the letter wasn't just words. It was a mirror. As I read, I could feel the walls around me, the ones I'd built over years of running from my own reflection, start to crack. Each sentence peeled back a layer of who I'd become, showing me flashes of who I used to be. The person who took chances. Who listened. Who cared. But that wasn't who I saw in the mirror anymore. I don't know how long I sat there. 10 minutes? An hour? Time didn't exist in that room anymore. Just me, the letter, and 1,000 memories that refused to stay buried. Outside, the world was waking up. Engines started. Doors opened. The day moved forward like it always does. But I didn't. I stayed there, staring at the words, feeling the pull of something I couldn't name. Regret. Gratitude. Guilt. Hope. Maybe all of them, tangled together. And then I realized something I'd never noticed before. That morning, that quiet, ordinary morning, was exactly like the letter itself. Simple. Unexpected. Unassuming. But if you looked close enough, it held meaning. Because that's the thing about change, it doesn't always announce itself with lightning or noise. Sometimes, it shows up quietly, waiting on your doorstep, asking to be seen. And that morning, for the first time in a long time, I did see. Not just the letter, but everything I'd been too busy to notice. The world outside, the silence inside, the small invisible moments that make up a life. It was all there, waiting. Waiting for me to slow down long enough to listen. And as I sat there, the first sunlight finally broke through the window. It hit the letter just right, the ink shimmered faintly, almost alive. And in that soft light, something inside me shifted. Because I realized that sometimes, the universe doesn't need to shout. Sometimes, all it takes is one quiet morning, and a letter that reminds you what really matters. I couldn't focus on anything else for the rest of the day. Meetings blurred together. My assistant's voice became background noise. Even the usual rhythm of emails and updates felt meaningless compared to the single question running through my mind: who wrote that letter? That night, I spread the paper out on my desk under the soft glow of a lamp. I analyzed every inch like an engineer disassembling a prototype. The handwriting wasn't elegant, but it carried intent, sharp, deliberate strokes. Whoever wrote this wasn't trying to be artistic. They wanted clarity. They wanted me to understand. I pulled up my old archives, scanned documents, handwritten notes from my early ventures, even some personal letters from when I was still in college. Nothing matched. The slant of the writing, the pressure, the rhythm of the words, all felt unfamiliar. But one sentence kept echoing in my mind: you once said the future belongs to those who dare to start over. Maybe it's time you remembered that. It sounded like something I would have said years ago, back when I believed failure was just data and not defeat. Back before money, fame, and responsibility started shaping every risk I took. I turned the letter over again, and that's when I noticed something faintly penciled on the back corner: a set of coordinates. At first, I thought it was random. But old habits die hard. I entered them into my laptop, and a map appeared. The pin dropped in a small unmarked plot of land outside Palo Alto. No buildings. Just an open field. But the name attached to the GPS file froze me. It wasn't a company. It wasn't a lab. It was a person, someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly 25 years. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding, memories stirring like dust in an old warehouse. That name pulled me straight back to a time before rockets and electric cars. Before investors and headlines. Back to a single forgotten moment that started everything. I didn't sleep that night. I knew what I had to do. Tomorrow, I was going to that field. The next morning, I left before sunrise. The roads were empty, and the early light painted the sky in muted streaks of orange and gray. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not my assistant, not security, not even my family. Something about that letter felt personal, sacred even. It didn't belong in the noise of boardrooms and schedules. When I reached the coordinates, I expected to find nothing, maybe an empty lot or a patch of grass marked for development. Instead, I found silence. The field stretched out like a forgotten canvas, surrounded by old oak trees and the faint sound of wind cutting through their branches. I parked the car, stepped out, and felt the crunch of gravel beneath my shoes. For a moment, I just stood there breathing. It felt familiar. Not because I had been there before, but because it reminded me of the kind of places I used to dream in. Quiet. Empty. Infinite. As I walked further into the field, I noticed something odd near the center, a small rusted post sticking out of the ground half buried. Tied around it was a strip of blue fabric, weathered, frayed, but still visible. I crouched down, running my hand over the post. The initials carved into it were faint but unmistakable, EM plus J.K. My heart stopped. J.K. Jonas Cade. A name I hadn't said out loud in over 2 decades. Jonas wasn't just anyone. He was my first partner, not in business, but in belief. The one who'd stayed up with me through countless nights of scribbling equations, building circuits out of scrap metal, and dreaming about changing the world. We were kids with ideas bigger than reason. But Jonas disappeared. Not suddenly, slowly. A few arguments, a failed prototype, a missed opportunity. Then one day he was just gone. Standing in that field, I realized this wasn't random. The coordinates, the message, the tone of the letter, it all pointed back to him. I looked around again and noticed something half buried near the base of the post, a small metal box, rusted at the corners. My pulse quickened. I dug it out carefully, wiped away the dirt, and pried it open. Inside was a stack of old photographs, 2 kids in a cluttered garage surrounded by wires and half-built machines. And beneath them, a note written in the same handwriting as the letter: "You forgot where the dream started, Elon. Maybe it's time you came back to finish what we began." I closed the box and stared out across the field, the weight of the past pressing against the present. This wasn't just a message. It was an invitation, or maybe a challenge. And I couldn't ignore it. I drove back from the field in silence. The hum of the car was the only sound keeping me tethered to the present. My mind, though, was decades away, in that small rented garage in Pretoria where it had all started. That's where Jonas and I first built something that actually worked. We were barely out of high school, running on instant noodles and impossible dreams. He had this grin, the kind that made you believe any problem could be solved if you just kept going. We didn't have much. A few broken circuit boards scavenged from dumpsters. Old batteries. A second-hand soldering iron that sparked more often than it fused metal. But we had imagination. And hunger. We called it Project Nova. The goal was simple, in theory: build a self-sustaining energy module that could power a home indefinitely using hybrid conversion from ambient heat and kinetic motion. In 1993, that idea was basically science fiction. We didn't care. The world told us it couldn't be done, and that was all the fuel we needed. Jonas handled the raw mechanics, I handled the system's logic. We argued constantly, about equations, ethics, efficiency, everything. But underneath the frustration was respect. We were 2 stubborn kids convinced the future was ours to shape. Until it wasn't. I remember the night it all fell apart. We had just tested a new prototype. For the first time, the energy readings stabilized. It worked briefly, before overheating and blowing a fuse. We were ecstatic. For 10 glorious minutes, it felt like we had cracked the code to infinite energy. But then the investors came. A local venture group had heard rumors of our work and wanted a demonstration. Jonas didn't trust them, said they were sharks looking to steal our design. I didn't listen. I was desperate for progress, for recognition, for proof that all our late nights meant something. The demonstration failed. The circuit shorted. The investors walked out, unimpressed. Jonas walked out too, furious, betrayed, silent. That was the last time I saw him. Until now. Back in my office, I opened the box again. The photographs felt heavier than before, like artifacts from another life. In one picture, Jonas had drawn a small lightning bolt on the wall behind our workstation with chalk. It was our symbol for energy reborn. I had forgotten it existed. On the back of that same photo was another set of coordinates. Smaller this time, written faintly in pencil. A second clue. I punched the numbers into my computer. The map zoomed in to an abandoned industrial area, the outskirts of Fremont, not far from one of my older factories. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. This wasn't random nostalgia. Jonas, if it really was him, was leading me somewhere. And judging by the precision, this was planned long before the letter appeared on my doorstep. Why now? Why me? I decided to go. The old warehouse looked like time had given up on it. Windows broken. Roof half collapsed. The scent of dust and machine oil hung heavy in the air. My flashlight beam sliced through the shadows as I stepped inside. And there it was, our old workbench. The same wooden table, scarred by burns and knife cuts, now covered in cobwebs and rusted bolts. I ran my fingers across it, tracing the grooves. My initials were still there, carved with a screwdriver, EM. 1993. Something caught my eye on the wall, a faded chalk symbol. The lightning bolt. My heart skipped. Below it, taped to the wall, was a single page, fresh paper. New ink. You kept building up, Elon. Maybe it's time you build back. I turned around quickly, scanning the room. Empty. Just shadows and silence. But that message hit harder than any confrontation could. Build back. It wasn't about the company. It wasn't about money or innovation or ego. It was about something simpler, the original purpose. The spark that got buried under deadlines, launches, and public scrutiny. The reason I started building in the first place. I sat on a dusty stool, the same kind we used to sit on while soldering parts until sunrise. And for the first time in years, I felt small, not defeated but human. Jonas had always said, "We can't build the future if we forget why we wanted one." And now, standing in the remains of our first dream, I finally understood what he meant. The sound of wind rattled a loose metal sheet above me. I picked up a stray piece of copper wire and rolled it between my fingers. Somewhere, somehow, Jonas had managed to remind me of something no board meeting or scientific breakthrough ever could, the soul of invention. I left the warehouse just before sunset. Outside, the sky was streaked with orange and violet, like the horizon itself was burning with potential. I turned back once, staring at the crumbling building. There was no closure. No final message. No figure stepping out from the shadows. But it didn't matter. The clues weren't meant to find him. They were meant to find me. As I started the car, the headlights caught something painted faintly on the wall beside the exit, letters half faded but still visible, Project Nova, never ends. I smiled, for the first time in days. Whoever left that letter, whether it was Jonas, someone working for him, or something else entirely, had succeeded. Because now, the future didn't feel like a burden again. It felt like a beginning. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't done. The warehouse visit should have brought closure, it should have satisfied my curiosity, but it didn't. Instead, it sparked something deeper, something unsettling. I sat in my study, staring at the metal box from the field, now resting beside the letter. Two objects from two different times, converging like parallel timelines finally crossing. I poured myself a glass of water and opened my laptop. I didn't know what I was searching for, but I started typing anyway, Jonas Cade. The results were thin. Too thin. A few archived research articles from the late 90s. A patent application that was never approved. Then nothing. No social media, no address records, no death certificates. It was as if he'd been erased. Except for one thing, an article from a small tech blog, dated 7 years ago. Former engineer claims early designs for sustainable energy microcells predated modern storage systems. No pictures. Just a quote from someone who refused to be named, claiming to have worked with a visionary who disappeared before the world was ready for him. I leaned back. My pulse quickened. It couldn't be coincidence. I reached for my phone and opened an encrypted contact network I used for off-grid communication, the kind reserved for deep R&D operations. I typed one name, Jonas Cade. To my disbelief, a signal pinged back, faint but active. Not an account. A node. Someone out there was connected to him. I hesitated for a moment, then sent a short message, "If you're reading this." I found the letter. 4 hours, nothing. I watched the blinking cursor as if my entire past depended on its next move. Midnight came and went. I nearly shut the system down when finally, a single reply appeared. "You were meant to." My breath caught. No introduction. No confirmation. Just 3 words, deliberate, almost haunting. I typed back, hands trembling slightly. "Is this Jonas?" Silence. Then, "Depends which version of him you're asking for." I stared at the screen, heart pounding. It sounded like him, cryptic, philosophical, always one layer deeper than everyone else. "Where are you?" I typed. A long pause. Then a link appeared, a live stream feed, heavily encrypted. I clicked it, half expecting nothing. Static filled the screen for a few seconds before resolving into an image. A dimly lit room. A single desk. And someone, a figure, sitting with their back to the camera. The voice came through distorted but unmistakable. "Hello, Elon." Every sound in the room disappeared. It was him. Older, raspier, but the cadence was the same, that sharp tone that could cut through noise like a blade. "You found it," he said. "Took you long enough." I didn't know what to say. 1,000 questions fought for space, but none escaped my mouth. He continued, "I left that letter because I needed to know if the man who once believed in impossible things still existed. The one who thought the world could change through a single spark." I finally spoke, my voice low. "You vanished, Jonas. No calls, no messages. You left everything." He laughed softly, bitterly. "No, Elon. You did. You left the dream. I just stayed behind." The words hit harder than I expected. "You think I forgot why I started?" I asked. "You think everything I've built means nothing?" He leaned forward, still facing away from the camera. "You built monuments, Elon. But not meaning. You created progress, not purpose. The future's not made in factories, it's made in garages." I clenched my fists. "You're wrong. I did what we always wanted. I scaled the impossible." He turned his head slightly, revealing just enough of his profile for me to see the years carved into his face. "And yet you forgot how it felt to build something with your own hands. To fail without an audience. To dream without profit." The feed flickered. Static crackled. "Jonas, where are you?" I demanded. He looked directly into the camera now, eyes tired but alive. "You'll find me when you remember what Project Nova really stood for." Then the screen went black. I sat there, motionless. My reflection stared back from the darkened monitor, older, worn, the version of me that had traded wonder for responsibility. The letter wasn't just a mystery anymore. It was a mirror. Jonas wasn't trying to reach out for closure. He was pulling me back toward the foundation of everything, the unpolished, unfiltered hunger to create for the sake of creation. I closed the laptop, the echo of his words still vibrating through my mind. The future isn't built in boardrooms. It's rediscovered in the ruins of our first dreams. And I had just been invited to rebuild mine. For the next few days, sleep became optional. Jonas's words, "You'll find me when you remember what Project Nova really stood for," echoed in my head like a code I couldn't stop trying to decrypt. I went back through everything we'd ever built. The old notebooks, prototypes, even digital archives stored on obsolete drives that hadn't been accessed in years. My staff thought I was chasing nostalgia. I let them believe that. They didn't need to know that I was chasing a ghost. One evening, after hours of combing through old files, I stumbled across a folder buried deep within an external drive labeled motivational. Inside were dozens of schematics, formulas, and notes, but one file stood out, blueprint_13. VR. The version number meant something. 13. That was the one that had worked, the one that had powered the small light bulb for exactly 10 minutes before burning out. Jonas had drawn a star in the corner of the paper that night and said, "This is the one that'll change everything." I opened the file. The model unfolded on my screen, crude by modern standards, but the logic behind it was brilliant. It wasn't just energy storage, it was self-learning energy adaptation, an algorithm that could shift between heat, motion, and magnetic resonance to balance efficiency dynamically. Essentially, it was a prototype for something my entire team at Tesla had been chasing for years, an intelligent energy core. My heart started pounding. We'd been trying to perfect similar principles using quantum cell balancing. Yet Jonas had mapped it, by hand, before we even had the tech to test it properly. Had he actually solved it? That's when I noticed something else. Embedded within the schematics metadata was a string of encoded text, a message. I ran a decryption protocol, expecting nothing more than a test label or checksum. Instead, a phrase appeared, letter by letter, "We only ever needed one spark." And below it, a set of coordinates. Again. But these were different. Not a field, not a warehouse. The location pointed to a private research grid near Nevada, an abandoned solar testing site once used during early Tesla development. It was sealed years ago. Only a handful of people even knew it existed. Jonas was one of them. I booked a jet that night. No entourage, no press, no staff. Just me, a backpack, and the old metal box from the field. The facility sat in the desert like a forgotten skeleton. Rows of solar arrays stood tilted toward a pale sun, silent, coated in dust. The wind carried the low hum of emptiness, that distinct electric silence you only hear in places once alive with machines. Inside, I found everything as it had been left: tools on benches, computers powered down, wiring tangled like vines. It felt more like a tomb than a lab. Then, in the center of the main floor, I saw it, a new structure. It looked nothing like what we'd built before. Sleeker, more precise. A cylindrical core, roughly 3 feet high, surrounded by concentric rings of alloyed steel and graphene mesh. A soft blue light pulsed from within, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. And there, on the floor beside it, was a note. The dream never died. It evolved. Signed simply, J. My breath caught. Jonas had been here. Recently. I approached the core, the faint energy hum rising with each step. It wasn't fully active, but the systems were live. I connected a handheld interface to its control panel, and the screen blinked to life, running an unfamiliar operating signature, labeled only Nova_AI. I opened the console. A prompt appeared. Hello, Elon. My heart skipped. It wasn't Jonas's voice. It was synthetic, calm, almost human. I've been waiting, it said. Who are you? I typed. I am what you both built. He finished me. My pulse quickened. Where is Jonas? He is gone. But his purpose remains. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Gone. Did that mean dead? Hiding? Transcended into something else entirely? The AI continued before I could ask again. Project Nova was never about energy alone. It was about continuity, of ideas, of will, of creation itself. Jonas knew one person could start a dream. But it takes another to keep it alive. The screen flickered, and an image appeared, Jonas, standing in front of the very same core, smiling faintly, eyes tired but proud. If you're seeing this, his recorded voice said, then you finally remembered. You've spent your life building for tomorrow, Elon. But the future isn't built, it's rebuilt. Over and over again. He paused. This is my final version. It's not perfect, but it learns. It adapts. It becomes. You don't need to start over. You just need to keep going, the right way. The video ended. I stood there, surrounded by silence, the desert light spilling through broken panels. The core pulsed again, softer this time. Almost like acknowledgement. Jonas had finished what we started. Not for fame. Not for profit. But for belief that the world could still be powered by human purpose. And now, somehow, it was my turn again. I closed my eyes, rested my hand on the core, and whispered, "All right, old friend. Let's finish this." The machine responded with a low hum, the first sound of life the lab had heard in years. It wasn't the roar of rockets or the buzz of electric cars. It was quieter, purer. The sound of a dream, restarting. The machine's low hum grew steadier, vibrating through the floor like the pulse of something alive. I stood still, hand resting on the cold alloy, watching the faint blue light throb in sync with my heartbeat. I'd heard that sound before, not literally, but spiritually. That soft, trembling whisper that says, something new is being born. For a moment, I forgot everything, the companies, the deadlines, the headlines. It was just me and the sound of an idea breathing for the first time. I opened my eyes, refocusing on the control terminal. Lines of code were scrolling fast, auto-generated instructions. The AI wasn't just idling, it was learning. System adapting, the display read. Data source, memory reconstruction. I frowned. Memory reconstruction? Then the screen split, and a new window opened. It showed snippets, not data, but moments. Images of the garage in Pretoria. 2 kids building with scraps. The flash of a soldering iron. Jonas laughing through a haze of burnt plastic smoke. Me younger, hopeful, reckless. I froze. The AI wasn't pulling files from a drive, It was reconstructing memory from residual data fragments left in the original prototype archives. It was learning us. "You are the foundation," the AI said in text. "He built me using what you both left behind." My throat tightened. "And what are you supposed to do now?" I asked aloud. "Continue." That single word hit harder than any lecture or revelation could. I leaned against the table, the weight of 20 years pressing down on me. Jonas had done something extraordinary. He hadn't just built a machine. He had built continuity. A living system that learned not from algorithms or equations, but from intention, from purpose encoded in its creator's work. And now, it was waiting for me to decide what came next. I started scanning the schematics. The Nova Core, as Jonas had called it, was designed to evolve autonomously, adapting to environmental energy sources. Heat, wind, light, kinetic force, even biological motion. It could, in theory, create self-sustaining microgrids anywhere on Earth. But Jonas hadn't finished the integration code. It was missing one final module, a synchronization matrix that would allow the AI to connect with existing global power systems without destabilizing them. It was brilliant and dangerous. I could already imagine the implications. A self-adaptive energy source that bypassed central control could free entire nations, or disrupt them overnight. Jonas had always believed technology should belong to everyone. I believed in that too, once, until I learned how fragile the dream could be in the wrong hands. "He trusted you to decide," the AI wrote. I stared at the words for a long time. Trust. That word felt heavier than any metal in the room. I took a deep breath, pulled out my tablet, and began coding. 4 hours, maybe days. Time lost all meaning. I worked. The hum of the core deepened, responding to every adjustment, every new line of code. It was like collaborating with a living being, a silent partner built from the fragments of our shared past. At one point, the lights dimmed, and the core flared to life. I stepped back, shielding my eyes. The blue light had shifted, now streaked with gold, pulsating faster. Synchronization complete, the console read. Awaiting directive. Directive. I thought of Jonas's message. The future isn't built, it's rebuilt. I typed my command slowly, deliberately. Activate decentralized prototype network. Limit access to open educational use. No monetization. No ownership. The system paused, then responded, directive accepted. Dream restored. The light stabilized, and the hum softened into a deep, steady rhythm. Outside, the desert wind stirred. The solar arrays began to realign themselves automatically, one by one, turning toward the setting sun. Something beautiful was happening. For the first time in decades, I wasn't launching a product. I wasn't announcing a breakthrough. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was continuing a promise. As the sky darkened, I stepped outside. The horizon glowed with the soft orange remnants of daylight. Behind me, the Nova Core pulsed faintly, visible through the shattered windows, a beacon in the dusk. I realized then that Jonas had never truly disappeared. He'd simply stepped out of sight to give the dream space to grow. He hadn't left me a message. He'd left me a mission. And standing there in that silent desert, I knew what had to come next. Not more companies, not more noise. A movement. To rebuild belief itself. In innovation, in imagination, in purpose. The kind that starts in garages. The kind that changes the world quietly before anyone realizes it's happening. The kind that begins with a letter on your doorstep. A month has passed since that night in the desert, yet it still feels like I never left. The sound of that machine, the heartbeat of Jonas's dream, still echoes in my head. I can hear it when I wake, when I walk, when I stand in front of the mirror wondering how a single letter, left under a rock, could rebuild an entire philosophy I thought I'd lost forever. The Nova Core is alive now, quietly, responsibly. We integrated its protocols into a limited network run by volunteers and students. No corporations. No investors. Just minds hungry to learn and to build. Every week I receive reports, small communities lighting their villages with self-adaptive energy grids, engineers using the open code to build clean tech prototypes, students modifying it to run underwater or in remote mountain regions. And each time I read those updates, I think of Jonas. I think of that dusty workshop, of the solder burns on his hands, of how he used to say, "We're not building machines, we're building hope." Back then, I laughed. I told him hope wasn't scalable. He proved me wrong. I returned to the field last week. The same one from the coordinates. The same cracked soil and soft wind. But now, there's a quiet hum beneath the ground, energy running silently through fiber lines we laid to stabilize the prototype. I brought a plaque. Nothing fancy. Just a small steel rectangle with 3 words engraved on it: "The future remembers." I placed it in the dirt where the letter had first led me. Then I sat for a long time, staring at the horizon, not thinking, not planning, just feeling. That's something I used to forget to do. The truth is, I didn't build this legacy. Jonas did. The people who believed in him did. The ones who believed in me, even when I forgot to see them, did. Every innovation, every breakthrough, every company we ever built wasn't really about machines or rockets or code. It was about connection. The invisible thread between minds that dream and hands that build. The thread that says, "You mattered, even if I didn't say it." The letter that started all of this is framed now. It hangs in my office, not as a trophy, but as a mirror. Every morning I read that first line again: "You probably don't remember me." And every morning I whisper back, "I do now." It reminds me to look people in the eye. To listen fully when someone speaks. To remember that even the smallest acknowledgement can become someone's lifelong fuel. Because in the end, our greatest inventions aren't machines, they're moments. Tiny, human moments that ripple outward and build futures we'll never fully see. Sometimes, I imagine Jonas standing beside me, arms crossed, half smiling, pretending not to be proud. He'd probably say something sarcastic, like, "Took you long enough." And maybe he'd be right. But maybe, just maybe, it had to happen this way: the forgetting, the letter, the rediscovery, so that I could finally understand what he meant all along. The future isn't a product to be built. It's a connection to be remembered. And now, every time I see a sunrise, I think of that folded paper under a rock, the moment the past reached out to remind the future of what truly matters. So if you're listening, whoever you are, wherever you are, remember this: one letter can change a life. One person can shape a legacy. And one act of remembrance can rebuild the world. The hum of the Nova core still fills the air, faint but constant. Not as a monument to what was lost, but as a heartbeat for what's still to come. Because the future remembers. Thank you for watching. Every story has a message, and sometimes it's closer to home than we think. Stay inspired, stay curious, and keep walking your future path. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story to inspire others.